The Trek Geeks Podcast Network is proud to have Fansets as its presenting sponsor. Fansets is the home for amazing pin collectibles with over 300 officially licensed Star Trek pins and new releases every month.
Stay tuned for a special discount code worth 10% off your next order at fansets.com. Fansets. Our pins have character.
Hey, this is the Hageman brothers.
This is Dan.
And I'm Kevin Hageman.
We are.
See, now it sounds like you're not a Hageman, Dan.
whether we are, am I a Hageman or not, we are the creators of Star Trek Prodigy, and you're listening to Discovering Trek.
Floor pie, tube grubs, and Ferengi spit plates. What has our intrepid crew gotten into this week? Let's experiment with the transporter and join us for our discussion. I'm Mike Bovia, and this is Discovering Trek Prodigy. Thanks for joining us on Discovering Trek, the Star Trek Universe companion, presented by Fansets. This week on Prodigy, we learn a little bit more about Dal and why he is the way he is. And I often get that question a lot at home. Why are you the way you are? And it's typically coming from my co-host. That is my progeny, Emilie. And Emilie, how often are you asking me that question? Pretty regularly, right?
Every single day.
Every single day. Why are you the way you are? Well, instead of expanding upon that, why don't you tell everyone where they can find us online?
You can follow the show on Twitter at Discovering Trek, and you can find us on Twitter at Trek Legacy and on Instagram with the same handle. You can also find us in Camp Kittimer from time to time. If you'd like to join the conversation there, answer a couple simple questions, and you'll be welcomed in by our admins Haley, Jackie, and Fark. You can subscribe to the podcast by downloading the Trek Geeks mobile app or by searching for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
So we have multiple guests today. As we've discussed in the past, it's important to us to make sure that with a show such as Prodigy, where it's intended for the younger audience, that we're able to get guests on that are part of that audience. So we do have a parental guest with us as well. And he is a writer and a professor at the University of Connecticut, focusing on storytelling in media and public communications. But as mentioned, he's also a father of 3. So we welcome the Black family. We have Father Jake, son Jonas, and then twin girls, Elisabeth and Rachel. Everybody, how are you today?
We're good, Mike. How are you?
Really?
I am great.
Really happy.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad because I believe the 2 of you are the youngest that we've had on the show so far, which is really cool. But again, this show was created for the 4 of you, Emilie, Jonas, and Elisabeth and Rachel. Your dad and I, well, we like it. I don't think it was really made for us. So that's why we want to talk to all of you. But before we get into discussing anything in particular about this episode, how are you all liking Prodigy in general so far?
Good.
It's really good.
Yeah. We're really enjoying it as well. It's a fun ride every time. Definitely got to say that. How about you, Jake? Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I love it. We're actually I'll be using the pilot episode in one of my classes at UConn this semester.
Oh, that's awesome.
As I discuss entry points for franchises. And since this is what that show is designed to be, I thought I would introduce it to a generation of college students, most of whom, from my experience, haven't had much exposure to the franchise. Mm-hmm. You know, we had that gap over the last few years where there wasn't a lot of new Trek. And so this is filling a hole in pop culture, but also targeted to this demographic, like my kids here, Emilie, and upwards to my students at University of Connecticut.
That is awesome. All I can say is I wish I had been in school where they let us watch Star Trek as part of the curriculum. You know, we never got that. So Emilie homeschools, so I have thrown it in there a few times.
Yeah, see, there you go. You're teaching what you wish you had taught.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, this is a reminder that this episode of Discovering Trek provides spoilers for the Prodigy episode First Con-Tact. If you have not watched it yet, head over to Paramount Plus and watch the episode, then head back and listen to us. Failure to do so leaves you open to spoilers. Episode 7 of Star Trek Prodigy First Con-Tact aired January 13th, 2022. It was written by Deandra Pendleton Thompson and directed by Steve Ahn and Sung Shin. Emilie, can you tell us what First Con-Tact was about?
The crew of the Protostar is experimenting with the transporter, trying to find out how far they can transport things, ending up with Murph sliding down the outside of the hull. Janeway calls them all to the bridge for a distress call, but when Dal hears it, he recognizes it immediately. They're greeted by Daimon Nandi, a Ferengi who also seems to have raised Dal and already has a scheme planned. While on her ship, Pog discovers a Klingon cloaking device that needs to be powered by chimerium, and Rock lets it slip that they have a lot of it. Nandi wants to use the Protostar to acquire a Remolite crystal, calling it a diplomatic mission to a planet that has never encountered aliens before. Prompting Janeway to give a lesson on the Prime Directive, things go all wrong from there, as the crew makes contact, but Nandi ruins it by stealing the crystals and fleeing. When Dal catches her, it's revealed that she's stolen all of the chimerium to power the cloaking device on her ship, and that she sold Dal into slavery. Dal does get the crystal back to the planet, but Janeway is unhappy with everyone, and Dal realizes that his mentor never cared about him at all.
Lots of tongue twisters in there. Remolite, chimerium, all kinds of different things that we learn a little bit more about in this episode. All right, so we want to talk to everyone about their thoughts on this episode. So we are going to go from youngest to oldest, at least in the kid department. So we will start with Elisabeth, who is 1 minute younger in the twins department. So Elisabeth, what did you like about this episode?
So I really like Zero.
Zero is pretty cool, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So he's your favorite character?
Yep.
Awesome.
Very
Awesome. So then Rachel, what about you? What did you like?
So my thoughts on the episode were really interesting and fascinating. I really just liked the whole episode. I don't really have a favorite part.
That's not a bad thing. There are some times that I have episodes where I can't put a finger on what I like the best. I just like it. So you're in good company. All right. So Emilie, you are a little bit younger, so you get to go next.
Okay, well, I have a lot of things because I always do.
I'm guessing it has something to do with art and animation somewhere.
Yep. Okay, so the first thing that I noticed is that the crystals were different colors, all of them. So they glow okay, so you know how the crystals glowed? They did that thing where they were like throbbing, kind of. Pulsating. And they all pulsated a different color. There was purple, green, orange, and yellow, and I think a little bit of blue. So I noticed that, and I really liked that, how they didn't just use, one color. I don't know if anybody here will understand this at all. Okay, so
you're going to get into the technical side of drawing and art, right?
No, it's actually something completely different. But So the creatures that were on the planet, they reminded me of Xant from Twilight Princess, which is a Zelda game, which I don't know why, but they did. And I found it interesting that they already knew how to calibrate a tricorder. Unless I'm forgetting how they learned that. I noticed that. Because Gwen tells them all to calibrate their tricorders to the frequency, and they all do it like immediately.
They seem to be a quick study.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad.
I also noticed that the Ferengi computer palette colors were red. Yeah, both of them were red and green, which I noticed, which I kind of feel like is towards the fact that the Ferengi aren't necessarily great, but they're also not bad. Like, they're selfish. Going
back to what you talked about last week. Yep. Yeah,
like they're selfish, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad because they still do good things sometimes. I mean,
well, those were also the colors that were used for the Ferengi computers in previous Star Treks. So,
yeah. Okay, and that's it.
That's it. All right. So, Jonas, I saw when she started talking about Zelda that you perked up. So I'm assuming that that you understood the reference.
Yeah.
You agreed, right?
Yeah.
You agreed with that reference.
Yes, I agreed.
Awesome. So, what were your thoughts on this episode?
It was pretty good overall. Fantastic humor, plot twist ×2, and some stellar animation, which I really liked.
Absolutely. So I don't know which one of us is older, but I'm gonna just let Jake go first since I'm the host, and I don't think we need to reveal our ages. So
yeah, I appreciate that, Mike. Well, we'll say age before beauty, then maybe.
I don't know about that either, but
I'm there for you, man. I appreciated very much kind of behind the scenes info that this is Deandra, the writer's first television work of any kind, and we've talked before on your other shows. I have a background in writing television and stuff. First episode I wrote of television was not nearly this good. In fact, I'm embarrassed to have anyone see it ever. But this episode was a phenomenal debut for her, and I can't wait to see what else comes from her. I also really appreciated the subtle story progression with the black box holograms or whatever the Janeway hologram was looking back at, and I appreciated kind of a throwback to pre-DS9 Ferengi-ism, because Deep Space Nine definitely enhanced the Ferengi character, but this was a marauder in the truest sense of a Ferengi marauder, and I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you there. Part of what I wrote down for this was that Nandi was the traditional Ferengi, the one that, like you said, it's what we grew up with until Deep Space Nine, when we got to know the Ferengi a little bit better. I
wonder too, Mike, like, was she the first female Daimon? Or is that just a claimed title that she has?
I don't recall seeing one, so I think you might be right.
Yeah, she was actually dressed too, which for that time period of the Ferengi, just up until then, was not all that common.
Right. And going back to Deep Space Nine, it was at the end that Zek allowed women to trade. So potentially at this point, maybe they're even allowed into the Ferengi military, where she could be an actual Daimon. She has that marauder. So, I mean, but the thing we know about Ferengi too is, she could have stolen it, claimed it, bought it, whatever the case may be. So,
Yeah, and took the title because she had the ship.
Right, exactly. So I gotta say 100% along the same lines as you with Deandra's writing, especially since with this writing we get a little peek behind the curtain into Dal's backstory. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but he was not the best character for the longest time on the show so far. And now we're starting to see the tables turn on that, where he's becoming a more likable person. And I think this backstory of his is going to help out a little bit there. I like that as the communications person, Gwyn figures out the harmonic resonance. I also liked that Janeway, as she was looking back, like you said, Jake, at like that black box of what had happened on the Protostar before, that as she zooms in, she can see Dreadnought in the background. So we know it has something to do with him. Yeah. You got that same thought?
When I know that something was there, and I thought that Dreadnought was there before that we saw. That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. We talk about these things. We talk about what we think is going to happen in the future every week, and I believe last week Emilie said that. So
that's just because I'm a genius. Okay. I mean, no need to applaud, but you are in the presence of some serious mind.
Are you like Zero?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think so. So the one thing I will say is the first time I watched this episode, I thought it was going to be the first episode that I didn't like this season. And I think the only reason why is because I was hoping to see more follow-up on what we saw at the end of last week's episode. So when I took that out of my thinking completely, I loved this episode. So I kind of went in there with a preconception, and it tainted my first viewing of it. But once I watched it the second time, I loved it. There was great stuff in this.
I think, Mike, that's a kind of a Star Trek tradition as well. Like when you look back at the odd numbered movies, they were a little disappointing because you expected the even number movies. But if you let go of the even number movies, they were great. They're great on their own. Like Insurrection as a movie by itself is a fun romp. Insurrection coming after First Contact, not quite as fun a romp. Yeah.
Yeah. And Search for Spock, I love that movie. But I can see why people aren't that high on it, because it comes after Wrath of Khan, which is one of those movies that, forget about just in Star Trek lore. It's like, it's a movie that's on top of many genres. So, that I can see it. And it's just before Voyage Home, which everybody loves as well. So it kind of gets a bad rap just because of that.
Right.
Library computer, data being received.
All right, so we've reached our section of the show where we look at what we've seen in Star Trek before. So the Black family, I know, has some callbacks from previous Star Treks that they're going to share with us.
Yeah, for sure. Elisabeth, which one was your first one that you noticed?
Chakotay.
Yeah, Captain Chakotay, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mysterious captain.
You say it louder.
Yeah.
So
The mysterious captain when they did that mysterious video.
Yeah. It's
only we could see Harry Kim become a serious captain.
I'd like to see Harry Kim become a serious lieutenant.
Right. Exactly. So Chakotay, what else do we have?
Yeah, what else did you see, Jonas?
Going back to Del's mom being like a traditional Ferengi. The rules of acquisition were mentioned throughout the whole episode.
Oh, I also realized that. I
Yep.
didn't think it was based on the
And-
franchise.
Yeah. It's just a nice reference to previous treks.
Yep.
And you noticed her weapon too, Nandi's weapon.
Oh, yeah.
I
The
was
Klingon
gonna say
disruptor.
Oh, you were.
Nice. So you've got, I had both of those on my list. Very nice. I was wondering,
Yeah,
Rachel noticed the disruptor as well because
Jonas has a toy of that gun.
oh,
That sound effect.
That I actually bought at this past Las Vegas, the 55-year
Oh.
mission.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. We love that.
And what did they learn about in this one? They first learned how to use the
I know it's
transporter.
transporter.
Yeah, that's right. And you loved it when they used it on Murph, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot to mention that part because I had that in the things that I liked about this episode too. How he just slides right down the front of the ship there.
Yeah. I thought he was always flying.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
He would be.
And we
He just
noticed-
kept going.
Yeah, exactly. We noticed the Prime Directive
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty solid callback.
Nice.
And I noticed that the writers on Twitter posted that that was actually taken from one of the books, the 150-year celebration of the Federation, written by David Goodman, producer
Mhm.
on Futurama and Family Guy and a bunch of other shows,
And a writer on Enterprise.
and a writer on Enterprise, right? Which I thought was a pretty clever tie-in that way. And then I would be remiss a week after my wedding anniversary if I hadn't noticed the Horgon. We'll leave it there
That is
for the all
fantastic.
ages group.
I was going to say that is the adult element coming into the show. Em, what did you have for callbacks for this week?
Emily, sorry. Yeah, I'll shut up.
I didn't have much because I wasn't really paying attention to that as much. I also have a hard time finding them in general, but the one thing that I noticed was the cloaking device and the tube grubs.
Wow. So between all of you guys, you've effectively scratched everything off of my callback list, except the obvious one. There was a Ferengi in this episode. That's a callback in itself. So, but also that Ferengi ship. I can't remember if we've seen. I think the last time we saw a Ferengi ship was in Voyager. I can't remember the episode, but the animation of that ship is gorgeous in this episode. It almost looks better than the models did back in the day.
Yeah, as I was watching that, I remembered that once upon a time I had the Galoob action figure Ferengi ship, and I don't think I have it anymore. And I was really bummed about that because I wanted to pull it out for today.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. That was a beautiful one too. But that's what happens when you get to our age. The toys that you played with as a kid, they just disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my figure go. I want to do something that's about that, gems.
Oh, the crystals? You liked the crystals? Something about
I like
the
the
crystals?
crystal that is sounding like that Minecraft noise effect for the amethyst.
Oh, cool. Nice. So
that was kind of a callback to Minecraft.
Wait.
And can we include Simpsons callbacks?
Oh, floor pie.
Floor pie.
That was why I included that in my intro. I couldn't resist.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, yeah.
Please specify how you would like to proceed, sir.
So Star Trek has always tried to teach the audience something about itself, and now Prodigy is bringing that, as we can see here today, to the next generation. So this portion of our program is the Starfleet Academy portion, where we find out what we as the audience, whether we are younger or older, may have learned from this episode. So this week was a tough episode to pull multiple lessons out of, we'll say. So I think there might be two sides to this one, a group, like family group sides. So we will start with the Black family as the guests. And I know Rachel was going to introduce what their lesson was that they learned this week.
Be careful of who you trust.
You know what? I had that exact in my notes.
So why is that important?
Because let's take, for example, on like the internet, someone might be like, I'm going to give $1,000 to my friends. Just sign here or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then when their friends like write down, or even if they aren't the fan, they just want the money, they just write it down. They won't get the money, but the person will keep the money and just get their info.
Yeah.
Steal their identity.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like give me all of your credit card information, your social security number, and your phone number, and I will definitely give you $1,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess that's exactly what it's like. I don't got similar.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines as that when I watched that trust factor. Anything else you guys want to say about that?
Yeah.
I did a completely different lesson that I thought.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh.
I didn't
All right,
realize
go
that.
for it.
It's working together because they all kind of went to themselves without working together. They all just ran different paths when the planet started crumbling or something. They didn't help each other.
Yeah, that seems, you know what, Elisabeth, you picked up well on that, because that seems to be a theme that's going on throughout this whole series is the thought of it's the thought of working together as a team. So yeah, great job with that.
And I think we also learned don't steal.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just obviously.
It's one of those thou shalt nots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the bonk on the head moment where they're just letting you know, hey, you should already know this, but just in case you don't steal. So from our end, I was thinking, so trust was the very first thing I thought of, but I think you guys did a far better job in talking about it than I could have, because I couldn't think of how I wanted to bring that up. So I actually thought of one other thing, and that's that at a young age, you become a product of your influences. So as kids, you all tend to do a lot of the same things that your parents would do, and that's what shapes you as you grow up. And we've been told by the writers of the show that Dal isn't a bad guy; he's a good guy. And the problem, the reason why he has acted the way that he did at the beginning of the series was based off of things in his past. And now we're seeing that. We see that Nandi was a bad example for Dal as he was growing up. And so that shaped who he is at this point in his life. But the other thing that we can take away from this and we see it at the end, is just because you've had that influence in your life and it makes you who you are, you can still change. And we see that happens with Dal here. Dal, right away, he says when they're in that underground cavern, we shouldn't be doing this. We should not be here. And he got the point right away. We can see the change within him, and we've been seeing the change as the series goes on. But that was what I thought. I'd like to take a moment to talk about Fansets, the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network.
Long before we were doing a podcast sponsored by them, we were Fansets customers. The quality of the merchandise they put out is second to none. It's not just Star Trek that they offer, as they have something for all different types of fandoms, including Scooby-Doo, DC Comics, Batman 66, Harry Potter, and Rick and Morty.
And the next round of Star Trek Micro Crew pins come out on January 15th. And since Prodigy is in the Gamma Quadrant right now, it's fitting that Lita and Wei Yun are two of the three releases coming up. Now, the third is the heavily awaited Dan Davidson lookalike, Galt, Master Thrall of Triskelion. Keep an eye on fansets.com for those and over 300 officially licensed Star Trek pins, including the Delta's Done Right collection, as well as micro crew pins, episode pins, and many other great designs. So go to fansets.com and put a whole bunch of pins in your cart.
As a listener to the show, you can receive 10% off your next order from Fansets by using the code Discovering Trek at checkout. And remember that you receive free shipping in the U.S. on orders $30 or more.
Fansets. Our pins have character. And we thank Fansets for being the presenting sponsor of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network. So now we come to our awards section, the Christopher Pike Medal of Honor. So every week we give out awards for what we liked the most from this episode. Even though they're not real awards, we pretend like we're handing them out to them. So we will start with the Blacks. And since there's four of you, I will let you all take which direction you want to go in talking about your awards. So take it away.
Since she was worried about being in the middle in all other times, we're going to let Rachel go first.
Awesome.
Go for it, Rach.
So my favorite stuff was Murph and the entire episode. I like Murph because he's funny. That's pretty much it.
Did you like last week when Murph swallowed all those grenades and then let out the big burp?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Elisabeth, what was your favorite part? Oh, Rachel wants to say one more thing, I guess.
Oh, go for it.
I liked the entire episode because it was interesting and fascinating. It was just cool to watch.
One of your favorites of this season, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, Elisabeth.
My favorite thing is the character Zero. And
So Elisabeth, what do you like the most about Zero?
that he could figure out emotions and he's very fascinated by stuff.
Yeah, that makes him a really, really cool character. Great, thank you.
All right, Mr. J.
All right. So this episode, I liked the humor the most, specifically the opening gag, like how excited they are that the floor pie is still hot.
That is awesome. I think everybody was laughing at the running back and forth with the pie, and then how it just ended with Murph sliding down.
Yes.
Yeah, and my favorite thing, I think, actually was, again, the black box video.
Mm-hmm.
I dig Chakotay, and I'm intrigued by his uniform, because his uniform looks quite different than anything else we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about why Janeway's got that lapse of memory, or the gap there. So that 1 minute sequence where she finds Dreadnought in the background was the high point of the episode for me. And yeah, that's the award-winning segment for me.
Cool. Yeah.
I also appreciated Nandi having her ears pierced. I don't know that we've seen that in Ferengi lore before that I recall.
Yeah, I can't remember if Moogie did or not.
Yeah,
she's the only one I can think of.
The swoop ones, maybe.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was just like necklaces that she was wearing or what. Yeah, that's a cool catch. It's a cool catch.
You don't see large gold hoop earrings anyway.
Right.
I guess they're probably latinum. Probably gold head latinum earrings
melted down.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you bring up Chakotay's uniform, because Emilie and I actually just talked about that last night when we rewatched this. So we're looking forward to finding out what's going on there.
It sort of looked like the flight suits from Voyager, sort of.
Oh yeah,
but also not really. So I'm curious if it's going to be like a lower decks kind of thing where we're finding out different ships have different uniforms, which is kind of a throwback to the original series. When they didn't have the Delta, they all had the different symbols on their uniforms. So
some of them said 55-year mission.
Yeah, and some of them were the Lost Ferengi.
Oh, hey, I like that. Nice.
One of them is the classic one.
Yeah, that's right. So the classic Delta. That's right.
All right. So M, what were some of your awards today?
Okay, so I want to mention the art. As always, I love art, and it's amazing. So one of the things that is in every episode that we've seen so far is the way that they use the color palettes to display the emotions through the images, because you can kind of just look at the show without hearing anything, and you can kind of just tell what's going on in one way or another, like the emotions that it's giving across, just from looking at it. And I think that it goes very nicely along with the scores, which is another thing that I want to put for my Medal of Honor. It is that they both go together so well.
Yeah, so, the music was phenomenal in this episode.
Always. But I'm done.
Sweet. And you didn't take any of mine, so I appreciate that. Believe it or not, I know this will impress and surprise you, Em. But this week, one of my medals goes to art and animation. That scene in that underground room with the crystals, and then how it culminates in that song where like the sand lifts up around them. That was just such an awesome couple of scenes. I've kind of taken for granted the animation in the show so far, just because, you watch it and you're thinking it's like Pixar, it's just, it's neat, but that just kind of blew me away, that scene. Jake, you and I talked about this at the beginning. Deandra Pendleton Thompson, got to give her an award here. This is the first episode of TV that she's written. She helps to advance Dal's story. She keeps the Ferengi true to form. But then at the end of the episode, that scene with Gwyn and Dal talking about are commiserating rather about parents that are not living up to expectations, was a very emotional scene. And I thought it was just a good character driven moment that I think it helps to bond the two of them together even more as this season's going to progress. And then finally, another thing that you should appreciate here, Jake, I'm going to go with an author on this one because David Mack is a consultant on this series, and Chimerium, which was talked about in pretty good detail today in this episode, rather, as being what helps to power that cloaking device. He actually invented that in a couple of his novels as a mineral that has natural sensor blocking abilities, which goes to show why it would be good for a cloaking device. So, he's been doing a lot of good stuff in this series so far. He kind of helped from what the Hagemans have said. He keeps them on track when it comes to staying within that Star Trek lore and making sure that they're not overriding things that have come before. So David Mack, giving him an award this week. So now we are going to shoot off into the future and engage the Protostar drive. So based on this week's episode or previous storylines, what do we think could be happening coming soon, either next week or later in the season? And we'll kick it off to the Black family. What did you all have for either your own thoughts or your group thought?
We have a group one.
Yeah, it's a pretty good group one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, Elisabeth, what do you think?
That we basically all think that the villains are gonna come into the Protostar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of revenge.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
You guys are thinking along the same lines as me.
Because you haven't seen
Dreadnought and the Diviner.
Diviner in a while.
Yeah.
And Nandi just sold him out. So
yeah.
It's basically inevitable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Cool.
I also think we might be surprised to learn that like Dreadnought might not have been bad always. I wonder if he was a Federation creation that evolved from the Protostar.
Well, that's pretty cool.
So can I.
I can't imagine. Well, it'd be very Star Trek to have an evil AI, but where would he have come from on the Protostar? Was it an attack? Was he there before? And if it was an attack, why didn't the Diviner always have the ship? So I suspect that he started as an AI portion of the ship and evolved toward evil.
That is really interesting. I think that is one of the cooler things we've heard so far. I like that. I like that a lot.
But also knowing the Hagemans, I'm way off and not even close. So
That's possible. All right, Em, Pen Twister, what do you have?
Okay, so basically, I think that since at the end of the episode we saw that what's her name? Nandi?
Nandi? Okay.
Yeah. That she got the thing from the Diviner about, the Protostar, and that she's going to not just tell them where they are going or where they are or where they were, but she's going to team up with them, and somehow they're going to figure out a way to get to them, because it could take it takes a very long time to get to, where the Protostar is.
From Tars Lamora, yep.
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't figure out a way. Like, there could be a wormhole, or, Star Trek does crazy stuff, so it could be anything. So my prediction is that they're going to team up with Nandi, and they're going to figure out how to get to the Protostar, and then, maybe the Protostar is like nearing Starfleet, and a ship comes to rescue them, and
So Star Trek does crazy stuff might be the understatement of the year. Of course, it is a new year, so there's more to come on that, I'm sure. So I think mine actually may be a little bit of a combination of the two of you. So going off of what Em was saying about the amount of time, so it takes 4 years for normal ships to get from Tars Lamora, where they were, to where the Protostar is now. Now, because of how they do communications, they were able to get that wanted poster out, and that's what Nandi found about the Protostar. So I think there's going to be some kind of staged message that will be sent to the crew, something maybe along the lines of the diviner is dying and Gwyn should come home to see her father for the last time. Something like that. There will be some kind of message that's going to make them turn around and have to go back to Tars Lamora, so that the diviner can try and get his hands on the Protostar one more time. Now, normally I am 100% wrong, so don't be surprised if I'm way off base with that one.
I'm in agreement of this statement of you always being wrong.
Thank you. That is my child, ladies and gentlemen.
Emilie, I just have to add, if a ship does come to rescue them, it better be Riker. I don't care what ship.
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we gotta have Frakes in like every series now. So yeah, why not put him in Prodigy?
Somehow he's got to get in there.
Yep.
Like maybe it's like an admiral or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are so grateful and so happy that you are all able to join us today. This was a fun time. I'm gonna say I was nervous as to how this was going to go with so many people, but I think it went beautifully. So thank you, Elisabeth, Rachel, Jonas, and of course, Jake, for coming on. Now, I'm sure the three youngins are not on social media. So, Jake, if people would like to congratulate your kids as to their podcast debut and hook up with talking to you about it, where can you be found online?
Well, actually, Jonas is on Twitter at Captain
nice.
JCB, CAPT JCB.
Like the actual @ is JCB capped, because apparently someone else had that.
Okay, so your handle is JCB capped, CAPT. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I had it backwards.
Yeah.
JCB capped.
But same general idea.
Yeah. And I'm at Jake Boy Slim everywhere.
Awesome. So again, we appreciate having you on, and go Prodigy. Looking forward to more of this.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having us. It's fun times.
Thank you.
It was.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Don't forget that you can support Discovering Trek Prodigy and the Trek Geeks Podcast Network by subscribing to bonus content on Patreon. Get access to unedited audio of all of our podcasts and a lot of other perks. If you'd like to support this and the other member podcasts of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network, beam on over to patreon.com/TrekGeeks, where subscriptions start as low as $2 a month.
For more great Star Trek discussion, check out the aforementioned member podcasts on the network. In addition to Discovering Trek, there's Trek Geeks, Rewind, Politreks, 5-Year Mission, Deep Space Pride, Infinite Trek, The Divine Treasury, Sci-Fi Sisters, Drawn to Trek, Science Station 2, and With the First Link. You can find all these shows and where to listen on trekgeeks.com/listen or by downloading the Trek Geeks mobile app.
Trek Geeks Podcast Network. No one talks Trek like we do.
So episode 7 continued to expand the backstories of some of our main characters. Are we going to learn more about what the Protostar's original mission was? And what is the Diviner's plan to get the Protostar back? Keep tuning in to Discovering Trek Prodigy as we have it all covered for you. Until then, never stop discovering.
Music for Discovering Trek is provided by 5 Year Mission. They're writing an original song for each episode of Star Trek. Hear more of their music at 5yearmission.net. Discovering Trek is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Coconut.